What's the ideal city in your mind? Like this or this? Of course, to evaluate a good city by its appearance is the initial way for us. When we want to become real planners, we have to consider more internal factors in a city, such as population, politics, economy, environment, natural resources, and so on. Kevin Lynch incorporated elements of the city image into the assessment. The contents of the city images so far studied, which are referable to physical forms, can conveniently to be classified into 5 types of elements: path, edges, districts, nodes, and landmarks. One of the most familiar elements to us is landmark, such as the Oriental Pearl Tower in Shanghai, the Times Square in New York, or the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. The reason why we can recognize the city when we see the landmark is that the landmark is selected from a large number of elements. Landmark is unique to the city and the whole world. Kevin Lynch thought that one might infer from this that the image of greatest value are those which most closely approach a strong total field, dense, rigid, and vivid, which make use of all element types and form characteristics without narrow concentration, and which can be put together either hierarchically or continuously as occasion demands. As for me, an ideal city must be very impressive to people. The city must have its own memory points, whether it is a traffic system with separate cars and citizens, continuous and charming landscapes, smooth boundaries, or iconic buildings. Some may argue that the psychological foundation upon which the metropolitan individuality is erected is the intensification of emotional life due to the swift and continuous shift of external and internal stimuli. Alongside this liberalistic ideal, there are conflicts between the economic division of labor and the further tendency. It is a function of the metropolis to make a place for the conflict and for the attempts at unification of both these in the sense that its own peculiar conditions have been revealed to us as the occasion and the stimulus for the development of both. Thereby, they attain a quite unique place, fruitful with an inexhaustible richness of meaning in the development of the mental life. In my opinion, the metropolis as a vast container contains all kinds of conflicts, driven by individualism and romanticism. In the wild pulse of conflicts, metropolises don't abandon conflicts but teach us how to understand them, because they are too small for the tide of history. As this article says, it's our task not to complain or condemn, but only to understand. Therefore, an ideal city has abilities to accommodate conflicts, to understand conflicts, to resolve conflicts. Urges seminal analysis of the interrelation of the social growth and the physical expansion of the modern cities. This article discusses the organization and disorganization growth of the city and the consequences of different degrees of urban expansion. Also, by studying the definition of mobility and using it as a standard of expansion and metabolism. For an ideal city, expansion is inevitable and mobility is uncontrollable. Urban planners need to control the standard of actual over the natural increase of population. It is necessary to have a correct and feasible planning form and enough controllable planning space to monitor real-time data such as urban population and economy at all times, so that we can deal with the disorganization of metabolism rather than allow it to expand arbitrarily and finally reach the uncontrollable point. What are man's permanent needs, and what are the collective urban means for satisfying them? These are the 2 questions discussed by Mumford in his article, which are also the conceptualization of the ideal urban form. The essence of the city is people, so we must understand the needs of people. He compared the modern city to the interacted cells, each cell balanced and partly self-contained, but also part of a wider social whole. Moreover, it is essential to the definition of the neighborhood unit or precinct. The boundaries of the urban cell must be as defined as those of the city itself. At last, the author concluded that if we respect the nature of man, the order established by urban planning must be an inclusive one. All in all, the ideal form of the city should uphold the people-oriented concept. The government should make reasonable adjustments to the social structure, optimize the layout of urban functions, and always put people's needs in the first place to meet people's material and spiritual needs. The rational use of natural resources, controllable population growth, and steady economic development will be ensured through macro and micro regulation. Fingers should readers the horrors of industrial urbanism by conducting them on a tour of Manchester's working class districts. The connection he draws between the physical decrepitude of the urban infrastructure and the alienation and despair of the urban poor remains valid to the present days. In my opinion, we can't take an average number to evaluate the economic development of a city. Moreover, we can only enjoy the delightful city and ignore the working class behind it. After they have built the city with good infrastructure, beautiful landscape, and comfortable apartments, they still have to face the problems of poverty. This economic imbalance can lead to slums, violence, and crime, and an even greater urban crisis. As a consequence, an ideal city should narrow the gap between rich and poor. The idea is to allow some people to get rich first and then lead others to get rich. The government should pay attention to the vulnerable groups and formulate relevant policies for them, such as medical security and subsistence allowances. The implementation of these policies will greatly improve their living environment, so the city can develop steadily. When the first criticisms of orthodox modernist planning started to emerge in the early 1960s, the neighborhood unit was quickly brought to the center of the battlefield. The size and the contents of these residential islands, border vacuums, rooted in the outmoded engineering logic of the tree-like functional classification system, are no longer viable. A key problem for Paris, according to some prominent transportation critics. Of course, there are pieces of evidence from empirical examples for the feasibility of continuous walkable urbanism. The example of London and Portland, Oregon. Neighborhood unit planning has indeed played a significant role in today's urban planning. A large city with a population of 10 million, for example, often has many areas, each of which has its own economic, political, commercial center, residential areas, and various infrastructure constructions. Different regions even have different ways of power supply and water supply. Some cities have been able to develop well in this model. However, blindly following such an urban planning model will only lead to problems. Firstly, the city form is simplified. Planning is not people-oriented and does not take into account the local context. The plan ignores what the local people really need. Blindly copy cities, they will lose their images. Cities lose their vitality when they don't have points for citizens to remember them. Ultimately, citizens will lose their vision for a better future. Secondly, in this mode, transportation between neighbors will greatly depend on cars. The implementation of the 15 minutes walking circle will also touch on the problem of distribution of resources. It's extremely difficult to divide functional areas and ensure a property walking distance. Thirdly, cities are constantly updating and expanding. There's less chance of expansion within the planned area because the scale of each area has been determined and the boundary between neighbors has been demarcated. The future development space of the city is greatly limited. In the end, I want to see ideal city, also called utopia. No matter it is a capitalist or socialist country, human beings are creating their own utopia through constant practice. Planning is impossible to be perfect. Under the pull of many factors, it can only be infinitely close to perfect, but it can never be perfect. Shall we stop our steps because of this? No. Looking back at history, we can see that generations of people made efforts for a better city. There are many excellent theories and successful cases that guide us forward. I still remember that the slogan of Shanghai World Expo 2010 is Better City, Better Life. With the attention of the whole world, Shanghai has tried its best to present itself as an ideal city. So, where will the next ideal city be? This is MUYANG Li. Thanks for your listening.